Boys and girls, we are back with another edition of the Ben Domenech podcast, brought to you by Fox News. You can check out all of the Fox News podcasts at foxnewspodcast.com. Today we have an interview with Elbridge Colby. He is the author of the new book, The Strategy of Denial, American Defense in an Age of Great Power Conflict. It's a book that really focuses on our confrontation with China and the potential ways that it could play out. Most likely, of course, over a dispute regarding Taiwan and the attempts that China might make in the coming months or years to try to attempt to take Taiwan back. Bridge is considered an expert on all of these matters. He's someone who served within the Trump administration, writing the strategic documents that essentially are at the center of the military conversation about our defense strategy going forward. And it's someone who has been thinking long and hard about these issues for some time. His book is on a number of end-of-year best-of lists, including the Wall Street Journals. He talked to us at length about this and a number of other factors regarding the debate over foreign policy within the Republican coalition. Elbridge Colby coming up next. Elbridge Colby, thank you so much for taking the time to join me again. It's good to talk to you.
Great to be with you, Ben. Thanks for having me on again.
So we now have your book to talk about, which last that we talked, I believe, was only it was still in that medium period before it actually gets out there and you have people react to it. The Strategy of Denial. It's my compliments to you on ending up on a lot of end of year best of lists, including the Wall Street Journals.
Thank you.
It seems to have had a significant response. When you were writing this book, how much were you thinking about translating the ideas that go into the strategic writing that happens at the highest levels of the Pentagon and government into a form in which the average American could actually understand what you were talking about?
Well, thanks, Ben. I really appreciate it. And it's been great to see the reception. And, but I think, thinking about it a lot. I mean, I wouldn't say that the primary purpose of the book is to sort of speak to as broad a sort of an audience as possible. But what I did want to do is to break the strategic argument down into a logic that is as clear and accessible as possible. So, and one of the things, honestly, I've been really pleased by is that, people who are not experts or even like working professionals, family, friends, or retired or, haven't worked in a long time have said, I picked up your book and I read it. And it's like, I get it. It's clearly stated. And that to me is very gratifying because, for a couple of reasons. I mean, as a writer, it's obviously nice to hear that, but it's also, I guess I have a fundamentally like small r, very Republican view of this, which is that, the people are supposed to decide and internalize and kind of think about what the overall national posture, position or strategy should be. And they're not going to decide whether to put more F-18s in Okinawa or not, but they're going to say, are we focusing on this or that? And I think people can get that. And so that's very, very gratifying. And also practically speaking, I mean, we live in a democracy, so our representatives do pay attention to what people say. And so it's really important that people do so. At the same time, I actually think the same logic is actually necessary for the more, the Pentagon and the defense establishment, because they need to have a clear sense also of what we're doing and, what we should be trying to do and how to make choices that really requires the same level of sort of like just putting it in plain English. I mean, you mentioned the Wall Street Journal thing. I was kind of happy when they wrote that, or I was very happy when they wrote that up, but they said like Colby in plain English says this thing. That was very like, I was happy about that because I feel a lot of this stuff in the foreign policy kind of world is cloaked in a lot of expertise, putative, real expertise, but it's sort of like hidden behind, so that it makes it hard to access. And that makes it, so that only a small number of people can really participate in the debate. And I don't think that's the way that it should be.
One of the things that we've learned over the last decade or so in American politics is that when you stop making an argument because you think you've won the argument, the argument actually continues just without your participation. I think that the free traders in particular in Washington, D.C. learned the ramifications of when that happens. They thought they had won the argument. They thought the argument was over, and the argument continued without their participation. And then they woke up one day and everyone hated free trade.
The trade one is so interesting because, I'm not the world's expert on trade, but I mean, there's this kind of like, in a group, in the blob that's like where there's a lot of sort of dead enders, as someone would say. The free trade zealots are among the most recalcitrant. It's like the people don't understand how good this is for them. Mm-hmm. And I'm kind of like, well, I don't know, like maybe people know what the benefits of like the trade, sure. Like I think free trade is good in a lot of ways geopolitically and stuff. But I mean, if the people are saying they don't like it, then maybe we need to kind of work through, the trade instead of saying like how stupid everybody else is and how they don't know what's good for them. It's just this whole
the people have spoken and the people are wrong.
The people are wrong. Exactly. It's like, exactly.
I want to ask you to explain some of the terms that you use in this book, because I understand them, but I think that you are using them in ways that are probably going to be new to most readers, especially those who didn't go through, 4 Paul courses and that type of thing in college. Your book is called The Strategy of Denial. What is a denial defense?
A denial defense, and I use denial for a couple things, but I think in the military context, it basically it's grappling with this debate about what do we need our military to do? And, for the last kind of generation, we were talking about regime change. We were talking about occupying other countries and pacifying them. And that's a very high standard for our military. Or you go back to World War II, we were going to unconditional surrender the two opponents. That involves a big war and a lot more people dying. What I'm trying to do here is in the context of a massively powerful and wealthy China is to say, okay, what do we actually need to do that's consistent with Americans' interests and our reasonable expectation of how much we're willing to suffer and risk for it, right? Because, let's say I say we should defend Taiwan, but it's not an existential interest. I don't think we should all be willing to slit our own throats for it, but rather we should be willing to go a certain distance. And if we can make our strategy fit within that certain distance, then we'll be golden, And so what a denial defense is look, what we really need to do, we may want to do more than this, but at the basic, what we need to do is we need to deny China's ability to subordinate the other countries that are in this anti-hegemonic coalition I talked about.
And talk about that coalition for a moment, because I think people probably instinctually understand what it is, but define it for them.
Yeah, I think it's basically the idea that we're on our own. We wouldn't want to, but we're not strong enough or resolute enough on our own to balance China, and nobody else is. So we have to work together. So it's a coalition. Okay. It's defined. The anti-hegemonic part is a negative thing, but actually I think having things in common that are negative actually makes it more ecumenical, makes it more, admissible, or people can be admitted, because it's it's countries that are bound together by their opposition to being dominated by China. They could be blue, red, yellow, black, whatever, free communists like Vietnam. I hate communism, but we'll work with them if they'll work with us, is my view. And that's basically focused on, again, that's the geopolitical meaning of denial, is denying China dominance of Asia, which is going to be the world's largest market area, and which, if they dominate that area, they are definitely going to intrude and impose themselves in our lives and undermine our freedom. So the denial of defense, which is basically defeat the invasion so that they can't impose their will on, say, Taiwan or the Philippines or Japan, is in service of the bigger goal, which is keeping that coalition going. Because it's all well and good to say that we have a coalition, and you kind of get this out of this administration a lot, but it's like the Chinese also have a strategy to work with that can I think of it as like short circuiting or collapsing the coalition, right? Instead of fighting everybody all at the same time like Hitler, you pick it all, you make the Chinese say you kill the chicken to scare the monkeys in the forest. They can see it. You make an example of a few countries and you essentially cause a run on the bank, and that coalition basically collapses.